We weren't actually intending to give XO's Defender 8 a full sea trial, but there are a couple of reasons we changed our minds about that. And firstly, we took it out yesterday for a brief look and were so impressed with the way it drove that we thought we had to include it as a full test. And secondly, when we looked at it first in Dusseldorf back in January, we made a couple of critical omissions. So it's time to set those straight. Now this is the boat, that's the XO Defender 8, and next to it is big sister, the XO Defender 9. And as you can see, this is rigged with a pair of 200 horsepower outboards. Now you can also rig it with twin 225s, or a single 400 or a single 450. But rigged like this, it's an absolutely superb driver's boat. It's capable of pushing on towards 50 knots, around about 46, 47. But it's the way it gets there that really impresses. Really ferocious pickup, loads of grip. You can control it so easily from the trim switch. You can elevate that bow, you can make it nice and efficient, or you can bury that hull, use that keel and carve around a turn with tremendous G-forces. It's such a sporting boat, such an entertaining drive. Really is well sorted. Now, because this XO Defender 8 is quite a traditional Nordic style commuter boat, and it's not necessarily going to fit that well with the UK market, I wasn't actually planning on doing any proper testing of this. I was just kind of having a look out of curiosity, but my goodness, what a performance boat it is. I mean, the amount of controllability you've got at wheel and throttle, at trim in particular, is outrageous, as I am going to illustrate pretty much now. Let's just get her up on the plane, and that happens fast, by the way. I'll put the hammers down rapidly so you can get a sense of that. Just trim her right in, because as I say, she's very trim sensitive. We'll head back away past the fleet of boats. Here we go. And we're already planing. And we're doing 30 knots already. I'm trimming around, and you feel the waterline just disappear way up. It feels so incredibly efficient, but at the same time, it feels really quite aggressive, like an authentic sports boat, a real plaything. We're doing 45 knots here, no problem at all. And what's really impressive though is if I trim her back in, I've got a good fistful of trim on at the moment. If I trim her back in, you can literally feel and hear and see that hull dipping low in the water, wiping sort of 5 knots off our top end. And then if you stick her into a turn, well, she absolutely, oh my goodness, corners on rails, it's outrageous, it really is. Goodness me. It's just so much fun, it's ridiculous. And this is with the twin 200s, you can have them with twin 225s if you like. Now the guys here, they say they pump the engines relatively high on that transom. So when you get up to speed from a standstill, you've got to trim a way in to really dig in with those props and get going. But the acceleration is something else. The efficiency when you're running fast is extremely impressive. And the grip, oh my goodness, the grip is fantastic. And as we're going over the big weights from some of the larger boats in the fleet, like the Targa 35, like the Sargo 45, you find yourself getting a little bit of air, and you can just control the landing with a tiny little blip on the throttle. Really push on, really control your trim, your attitude, the way the boat handles. And it's a bit of a hackneyed phrase, but it really does feel like an extension of you. It's a fantastic driver's boat. And as regards that efficiency, well, as I say, they quoted around about 1.8 litres per nautical mile at 35 knots. We've absolutely seen that here. And also, quite interestingly, right at the top end, 47 knots, we're still below 3 litres per nautical mile, 2.9, which means if you own a boat like this, you don't have to stick to those mid-30s, those kind of moderate or fast cruising speeds. You can really push on and have a play without burning too massive a hole in your own wallet. Although there are auto trim tabs here if you want them, you disengage those and run manually. And with this low profile, more traditional Nordic pilot house, much lower, in fact lower profile than that on the Defender 9, There's virtually no windage to speak of, just the odd tweak here or there, just a little blip on the button and that's you leveled up. It's very easy to do. Now let's step on board and have a little look at the details. As you can see, we've got a symmetrical layout here with evenly sized swim platforms on both sides, plus a little lifting platform here to get across behind this aft bench from one side to the other. We also have a ladder on the starboard side, plus the shore power over here. So if you're hooked up to shore power, you can just use the port side instead to avoid any trip hazards. And in the cockpit itself, things look relatively simplistic because they are. We just have a single bench here, 2-man, potentially 3-man at a squeeze facing forward. And that has a folding backrest. You can strap that down if you are anticipating a particularly wild offshore adventure. And this just enables you to trim out your engines as well. It's not perfect yet. This is boat number 1. So if I bring the camera over here, you'll see that this bar actually comes further forward than the backrest. So when you're sitting on it, you feel that in your back. So that needs sorting out, and I'm sure it will be. But while we're here, let's have a little look underneath this deck. There's a decent size of hatch, so you kind of anticipate some storage down here, but it's more a kind of engineering space. As you see, we've got a couple of batteries there on their own little plinth in the centre. We've got the diesel heating here, and XO's a very practical builder, so as you would expect, the diesel tank is directly next door, and the diesel filler is directly here. So that's a very short bit of pipe work, and that's next to the filler for the tank for those outboard engines as well, in its own little recess to avoid spills into the cockpit. If you're looking for better storage though, well, right next door, beneath this bench seat, there's a handy little recess, permanently open, so you can just sling your quick grab gear in there, your lines and your fenders, no problem at all. And if we spin around, what we'll see here, at the back end of this pilot house, I'll move back for a better perspective. Well, it's very stylish. It's quite low profile compared to its big sister. That's quite a lofty pilot house. Here, we have the kind of aesthetic of the Land Rover Defender, and that's certainly not by accident. That's what they've been going for. But it does mean that the internal pilot house and the aft cockpit, they're entirely divorced in this setup. And if we look inside, we'll also see that the layout differs markedly. While in the Defender 9 we have forward-facing seats, here we have a couple of big aft benches, 3-man benches facing each other across that central companionway, plus a pair of seats further forward, one for the helm, one for the co-pilot, both impact mitigated, and then central access through that screen up onto the bow. So this then is a very traditional Nordic style commuter boat. This is for people to jump on board in shelter, in comfort, get to their destination and jump off again. It's not about recreational versatility. Now, of course, that rigid bulkhead aft is not great for integrating those inside and outside spaces. And while an arrangement like that is fine for the Nordic markets, for Finland and Norway and Sweden, where people tend to value that and tend to use their boats that way, what we see on the sister model, the Defender 9, is a soft back end, not a rigid bulkhead. So you can raise up those canvases, you can reverse that aft bench, and that will face out towards this cockpit bench, and then you've got a nice dining station. And you can also use an infill to turn that into a sun pad, so that's much more versatile for family use, for recreational use. So I've talked to the guys at XO about this aft bulkhead, and they do tell me that it is possible to eradicate that rigid aft bulkhead and use a canvas system instead, which much better integrates those spaces, makes it much more versatile for family use, so that's good news. Now, we'll jump back on board, we'll open up this sliding door aft and we'll head straight through the pilot house and up onto the bow. Now, this bow space is impressive. It's a really good size. It's got cushioned gunnels there, so you can lean back and sit deep in there. I reckon you could sit maybe 6 people in here. We've done so on the Defender 9, which shares a similar kind of setup. It's very comfortable indeed. We also have some forward-facing cushions on the leading edge of the pilot house. And beneath this section, I believe, if I lift that up, there we are, there's a central cutout in that cushion. We have some enormous storage. Really good size, beautifully lined.
and drained as well, as you can see. It's a huge space, and of course it can achieve that because unlike the Defender 9, it doesn't have a forward cabin. So this is really good, really useful, great for a more extended cruise. In classical Nordic style, we also have a really practical step-through forepeak here. They tend to nose into beaches and rocks to deposit people, keep the props in deep water, deposit a stern anchor, and then pull themselves out again when they're finished. And if we look over to the port side, we'll see we've got another outlet, this time for the waist. Now, I spotted that in Dusseldorf. What I didn't spot, though, peculiarly, was the toilet. So quite legitimately, some of our viewers said, well, why have a black water tank outlet if you've got no toilet? Well, you do have a toilet, I just didn't spot it. Sorry about that, XO, sorry about that, everybody else. It sits right in here. It's not massive, of course, you do have to back in here to get access, and once you're in, sitting on the loo, as a 6-footer, you do feel the ceiling on your head there a little bit. You have to stoop a touch, but there is a sink on the port side here. No windows, no natural ventilation or light, but it does occupy a decent footprint, and it is a really practical solution. It does everything you want it to do on a really sporting day boat like this. Now, in this pilot house itself, there are some quite neat touches. As you can see, we've got a big aperture here for the soft concertina sunroof. I think we have the button for that right here, so we'll open that up right now, give ourselves some proper natural light in here. And because it's so big, it does actually make it feel quite a lot like an open boat. If we move back, you see the perspective. It's quite cool, and with that front door open as well, plenty of fresh air runs through here. Now, as I say, at the helm we've got impact mitigation seats as standard. That's fairly classical XO. They intend their boats to be used in quite an adventurous fashion, so they expect you to be out in all sorts of conditions. And at the helm, things are beautifully appointed, really good ergonomics as you'd expect. We've got an adjustable wheel there. We also have a little lift up lid there for your keys, your bits and bobs that you need to hand. And when that's down, this operates as a really comfortable rest for your elbows, so you can just rest your hands on the throttle. It's a very natural position. We also have a nice big, what's that, I think 16-inch plotter up on the main part of the dash. And visibility all round is really very good indeed for a pilot house boat with quite a low profile like this. Over on the port side, the co-pilot is also lavished with an impact mitigation seat, plus a good sturdy footrest there, and he also gets the luxury of diesel heating down there. Now, these seats further aft, they're perfectly comfortable and they're perfectly spacious, but a lot of people like to face forward rather than inward underway. That's not possible here, of course, unless you fancy occupying one of the forward seats or popping out into the aft cockpit. But what these also do is convert into a bed that spans the entire beam of the pilot house. And although it seems relatively modest, the beam of this pilot house, if we take this away, you'll see that actually the cushions go into these recesses on both sides. So when you're lying out on this bed, it's actually a really generous size, easily big enough for a man of 6'2", 6'3". Not a problem at all. And perfectly comfortable in terms of its width for two people to sleep in, pretty good comfort. Beneath this cushion on the starboard side, we have a decent bit of storage in the aft locker. That's currently filled with bags and cushions, and we also have access to your isolation switches for your engines and your domestic systems, as well as your bow thruster. And in the forward edge of that same unit, we have an integrated slide-out fridge, and of course that's matched on the port side by plenty more storage beneath there. So there we are, that's our brief whistle-stop tour of the XO Defender 8. And I must confess, it is a much more versatile boat than I first imagined when I saw it back in January in Dusseldorf. It does come with the option of a soft aft bulkhead to integrate inside and outside spaces, and it does come with a toilet to port of the helm, which totally transforms its practicality as a day boat. It is also a magnificent driver's boat, really fantastic, better even than the Defender 9, and that was a fantastic boat to drive and a really good sea boat. Now, of course, this commuter style layout will be of limited appeal to people outside of the Nordic states, simply because people tend to go boating differently. But as a performance boat, it's fantastic. As a water sports boat, it'll do a great job. And with this half bulkhead option, it actually makes a lot more recreational sense than I first imagined.